Keanu Reeves walked into the company lobby quietly, almost invisible. No suit. No tie. No shiny shoes. Just a worn leather jacket, faded jeans and old sneakers. His hair slightly unkempt, eyes calm but alert. There was no entourage, no assistant, nothing announcing his arrival. Only him. The receptionist glanced up, her expression polite but distracted. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Keanu said softly, his voice steady, almost neutral. She tilted her head, unsure, then pointed toward the hallway. "You'll have to wait there." Keanu nodded. He didn't argue. He simply walked to the waiting area and sat down. His posture relaxed but commanding, as if he owned the space without demanding recognition. Around him, the lobby buzzed with activity. Employees hurried past, laptops in hand, phones pressed to ears. None looked twice. Some even whispered, glancing at his worn jacket and scuffed sneakers, and smirked behind his back. What they didn't know, what no one realized, was that this man, sitting quietly, almost ignored, was the co-founder and majority shareholder of the company. 53% of everything in that building belonged to him. For years he had stayed away. Emails, calls, reports, he had never been one to parade power. But that morning, he had come unannounced, not to assert authority, but to see the truth for himself. The receptionist, still unaware, went back to her computer. Keanu's eyes scanned the lobby. Every detail. Every expression. The smiles that were a little too forced. The way some employees avoided eye contact. The subtle little gestures that revealed who felt important and who felt disposable. And then he noticed her. A new employee, blind, moving with confidence despite the unfamiliar space. She smiled at him politely, unaware of the silent storm in the man sitting just a few feet away. 7 minutes passed. No one spoke to him. No one offered water. No one acknowledged his presence. The entire lobby treated him like an outsider. Keanu sat quietly. Calm. Observant. Waiting. Backhand index pointing right. What would you do if this happened to you? Would you confront them? Walk away? Or silently let the disrespect slide, knowing you hold all the power? In those 7 minutes, the stage was set. The arrogance of those who judged by appearances alone was about to meet the truth they never expected. Most people in the building had no idea who he was. Not really. Keanu Reeves wasn't just any visitor. He was the co-founder of the company, the majority shareholder, the man who owned 53% of everything inside those walls. Yet, he didn't walk in with authority, didn't make a grand entrance. He came quietly, almost unnoticed. For years he had stayed away from the office. Emails were answered by assistants, reports filed by managers, phone calls handled by secretaries. His name appeared on documents, on the shareholder list, on contracts, but rarely in person. And for most employees that meant one thing. He didn't exist. That morning he had arrived unannounced. No warning. No press. No flash of fame. Just a man in a worn leather jacket and old sneakers, moving through the lobby like any ordinary visitor. Not to show power. Not to intimidate. Not to assert himself. He was there to see the truth, to witness how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. And the truth was fascinating. Executives who carried themselves with arrogance, believing their titles granted them supremacy, walked past him without a glance. A young manager whispered a joke, clearly thinking no one could hear. An assistant scrolled her phone, indifferent, typing while ignoring the man sitting just meters away. It wasn't just the indifference, it was the subtle disrespect. The way they assumed that anyone dressed like him, anyone without a flashy watch or designer suit, couldn't possibly matter. They judged by appearances alone. And in doing so they revealed their true character. Keanu noticed every detail. How the receptionist's smile faltered the moment someone more important entered. How a security guard barely glanced his way. How the cleaning staff avoided eye contact, unsure if they were supposed to acknowledge him. He didn't need to speak, didn't need to assert himself. Observation was enough. The arrogance of others was loud. It broadcast itself in every glance, every whisper, every hurried step. And yet there was something else. Among the faces that barely registered his presence, one person moved differently. A new employee, a blind girl, walked the hallway confidently, her steps measured but assured. She wasn't intimidated by the chaos of the office, didn't rely on appearances, didn't judge. She interacted with people politely, but firmly, carving her own path in a space where others underestimated her. Keanu's eyes lingered on her. In that moment he saw a reflection of what real strength looked like, not in titles or status, not in appearances, but in confidence, self-awareness, and presence. 7 minutes passed. 7 minutes where the company operated as if he didn't exist. 7 minutes where arrogance revealed itself without words. And by the end, the stage was set for what was coming next. Because in a few moments, the silent observer would step into the room where true power could no longer hide behind walls of wealth, suits, or ego. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever noticed how people treat you when they think you don't matter? Would they bow when they thought you were important? Or reveal their arrogance when they thought no one was watching? Keanu Reeves didn't need to announce himself. The building had already shown him the answer. And the lesson was clear. How people treat those they think are unimportant reveals everything about them. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the lobby, almost like a shadow among the bustling office. Yet, his presence was impossible to ignore, if only people looked beyond their assumptions. Executives and employees passed by, but no one truly saw him. One glanced at his worn leather jacket, noted his scuffed sneakers and turned away, smirking. Another chuckled at something over the phone, glancing toward him just long enough to confirm his apparent insignificance before returning to their conversation. Behind the glass walls of the boardroom, the scene was alive with energy. Laughter, the clink of whiskey glasses, and the subtle gleam of expensive watches catching the sunlight. People were busy measuring each other by status, power, and appearances, completely blind to the quiet figure in the lobby. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't react. He simply observed. Every glance, every whisper, every distracted nod was catalogued in his mind. The subtle arrogance in their smiles, the way they dismissed the world beyond their glass walls, it was all there, unmasked. 7 minutes passed. 7 minutes of quiet disrespect. No one offered him water. No one approached him. Not one single person acknowledged his presence. The office, with all its grandeur, had become a stage for human arrogance, and Keanu was the silent audience. And then he noticed it, the small acts that revealed even more. A secretary muttered under her breath, assuming no one could hear. A junior manager rolled their eyes when he looked in their direction. Even the security personnel moved past him without a glance, assuming he was just another visitor. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't aggression. It was far worse, indifference disguised as civility. People felt entitled to dismiss someone because they looked ordinary, because their jacket was worn, their shoes old, their presence quiet. And yet, amidst all this, a single presence stood out. The new employee, blind, moved confidently down the hallway. She wasn't concerned with appearances or status. She navigated the space with a measured grace, smiling at the few who acknowledged her, yet unshaken by the ignorance surrounding her. There was a calm power in her steps, a subtle message. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks quietly, waiting for the right moment. Keanu's eyes followed her. In a world full of arrogance and false importance, here was someone who commanded respect without demanding it. Someone who didn't need the recognition others craved to prove their worth. Time seemed to stretch. 7 minutes became an eternity of unspoken lessons. Every second revealed more than words ever could. The boardroom might have had money, influence, and status, but character? That was missing. True power wasn't in the glasses of whiskey or the shine of watches. It was in awareness, in self-control, in recognizing worth beyond appearances. And in those 7 minutes, the truth had been laid bare. Keanu didn't need to speak yet. The arrogance of those around him had already spoken loudly enough. Keanu Reeves wasn't angry. He was patient, observant, waiting. Waiting for the moment when silence would turn into revelation, when arrogance would meet consequence, and when those who dismissed the unassuming would finally understand what real power looked like. Because sometimes the quietest presence carries the heaviest weight. And in this office, that weight was about to be felt. Keanu Reeves finally stood. Not abruptly. Not with a shout. Not with any dramatic display meant to intimidate. He simply rose, calm, unhurried, yet every movement carried weight. The worn leather jacket, the old sneakers, the unassuming posture, it all belied the storm that was about to enter the boardroom. He walked through the lobby, each step measured. The bustling employees suddenly felt a shift in the air, though most didn't immediately understand why. A subtle tension, almost imperceptible at first, followed him. Their chatter quieted. Phones paused mid-call. A few heads turned, curiosity mingled with unease, but no one dared stop him. When he reached the boardroom door, the energy inside was thick. Executives sat around the polished table, drinks in hand, watches glinting in the light. Laughter rang out, casual and arrogant, but it faltered the moment they noticed the man in the leather jacket entering their space. "What are you doing here?" snapped one executive, leaning forward, voice sharp with authority, or what he assumed was authority. Keanu didn't answer. He didn't flinch. He simply stepped forward, walked to the table, and placed a single card down. Just a card. Nothing more. The room went silent. The laughter evaporated. The glint of watches and glasses seemed to dim under the weight of recognition, or rather, under the weight of understanding. Every face changed. Smiles disappeared. Eyes widened. A few swallowed hard, realizing their mistake, though the full extent of it hadn't even hit them yet. The card read simply, Keanu Reeves, co-founder and majority shareholder. The words were unembellished, unassuming, yet they carried the weight of power that no arrogance could obscure. Slowly, disbelief turned to shock. Some executives opened their mouths to speak but faltered. What could they say to the man who owned more than half of their entire world? They had laughed, judged, ignored, and dismissed him. And now, the truth sat on their table like a silent verdict. Keanu's eyes swept across the room. He wasn't angry, not outwardly. But there was an unmistakable clarity in his gaze, a calm that made the room shrink in comparison. He had observed, he had waited, and now it was time for them to understand. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken, until finally one executive whispered almost to himself, How did we not know? Another stammered, I thought he was just ordinary. And that was the problem. They had assumed. They had judged. They had underestimated. And in doing so they had exposed themselves. Keanu didn't speak again immediately. He simply let the silence do the work. Every glance at the table, every shifting of a foot, every nervous twitch, it was all confirmation of what he already knew. Arrogance, when unchallenged, always reveals itself. Then he looked at the new blind employee standing confidently by the door. Her presence was calm, unwavering, and it mirrored his own quiet authority. In her, he saw strength without arrogance, power without display, awareness without ego. And that quiet strength, combined with the unspoken lesson he was about to deliver, made the room understand that this was no ordinary confrontation. The executives realized finally that appearances could be deceiving, status could be misleading. And power, real, undeniable power, didn't announce itself with a loud voice or flashy displays. It waited, observed, and when the moment came it revealed the truth. Backhand index pointing right, and this was only the beginning. The arrogance of those in the room had been exposed. Their assumptions, their disrespect, their dismissal, they were all laid bare. And Keanu Reeves, in his calm, measured way, had ensured they would never forget it. The boardroom, once filled with laughter and casual arrogance, now held something heavier, a reckoning unspoken but palpable. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. Executives shifted in their seats, their laughter and arrogance replaced by an uneasy awareness. Keanu Reeves stood tall, calm and unshaken, the cards still resting on the polished table before them. Every eye followed him, yet no one dared speak. Then the door opened, slowly, hesitantly. An employee stepped in, clutching a thick stack of files, his hands shaking slightly. His eyes darted from Keanu to the stunned executives and back again, as if unsure who to address first. They were planning to sell the company, he stammered, voice quivering. Every head turned sharply. Whispers erupted. Faces drained of color. Some executives exchanged glances, panic flickering in their eyes. Secret deals. Hidden transfers. Hundreds of jobs on the line, all planned without a hint of transparency, all executed under the assumption that no one would notice. Keanu Reeves didn't speak. He let the employee continue, watching the room carefully. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. Confidential documents hidden in drawers, plans to move resources overseas, transfers designed to benefit only a select few. Every act of greed and deception was now exposed, and the people who thought they were untouchable suddenly felt the weight of accountability. The employee finished, dropping the files on the table with a muted thud. I didn't know where else to go, he said. I had to tell someone. Keanu's gaze swept across the room, landing on each executive. There was no anger, only clarity, an unshakable understanding that those who abuse power will always be revealed. You see, Keanu said finally, calm and measured, this isn't just about arrogance. This isn't just about ignoring someone who appears unimportant. This is about trust, responsibility, and integrity. The executives swallowed hard. They had underestimated him. Not just as a person, but as the man who held the company's future in his hands. They had assumed that titles, suits, and expensive watches were enough to shield them from consequences. They were wrong. Keanu stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on the edge of the table. You all treated appearances as reality. You judged people by what they wore, by how they looked, by the status you assumed they had. But the truth, he paused, letting the words sink in, is far stronger than any illusion. Power belongs to those who act with integrity, not those who hide behind deception. A few executives tried to speak. One attempted an excuse, another a justification. Keanu held up a hand, silencing them. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to witness the truth. And the truth is now clear. Your decisions, your secrecy, your disrespect, everything you thought was unnoticed, has been revealed. The room went still. Even the clock seemed to slow. The arrogance that had filled this space for years had evaporated in the face of reality. Keanu's eyes softened slightly as they moved to the new employee standing at the side. The blind girl who had entered the office hours ago, unaware of the storm she was about to witness, stood confidently, her presence a silent testament to resilience and quiet strength. In her, Keanu saw a reflection of what true character looks like, unshakable, unassuming, and impossible to ignore once revealed. And now, Keanu continued, his voice calm but authoritative, it's time for accountability. Not vengeance. Not humiliation. But a clear understanding that power used without integrity is meaningless. The executives exchanged nervous glances, understanding the gravity of the moment. They had assumed they could manipulate, deceive, and dismiss. They had assumed no one would see. They had been wrong. The files on the table told the story. The arrogance in the room told the story. And Keanu Reeves, quiet, patient, and unassuming, was the man who now held the final word. It was a question that lingered in the air. They had been disrespectful, secretive, and arrogant, but the full consequences of their actions had yet to be determined. Keanu's calm presence suggested justice was coming, but not the kind that relied on anger. The kind that relied on truth. In that moment, the boardroom wasn't just a room filled with wealth and power, it was a courtroom, a stage, and a mirror reflecting the choices of those who had believed appearances mattered more than honesty. Keanu Reeves didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need theatrics. The truth had spoken for itself, and everyone in that room could feel it. Arrogance and deceit will always be exposed, and respect cannot be bought or ignored. Keanu Reeves stood silently for a moment, letting the room absorb the full weight of what had been revealed. The files on the table, the guilty expressions, the sudden quiet, it was all proof that arrogance and secrecy had no place in his company. He walked slowly around the boardroom, eyes scanning each executive. No flinching. No unnecessary gestures. Just calm observation, like a predator studying its surroundings, not for anger but for clarity. I didn't come here to be recognized, he said finally, his voice steady, low, and commanding. I didn't come here for titles, applause, or acknowledgement. I came to see the truth. A few executives shifted nervously, trying to regain composure, but Keanu's gaze held them in place. It was as if he could see everything, their past decisions, their secret deals, their attempts to manipulate, and every thought that had crossed their minds about the people they dismissed. You were given positions of trust, he continued, and you abused it. You judged people by what they wear, by what they appear to be, by the status you assumed mattered. You ignored the quiet, the unassuming, the powerless. You thought you could act without consequence. His words hit the room like a hammer. Faces went pale. Hands fidgeted. Some executives tried to speak, to defend themselves, but the calm authority in his voice silenced every attempt. No excuses would work now. Keanu paused and let the moment linger, letting the gravity of their actions settle in. The arrogance that had defined the room for years had evaporated in those few minutes of silence and observation. Now it was time for action. You're all terminated. Effective immediately. The words hung in the air. The room froze. Security, who had been quietly stationed near the doors, moved with precision. Their footsteps echoed in the now silent boardroom as they approached, professional and calm, ready to enforce the decision that had been so patiently, so clearly delivered. Executives tried to protest, some attempted to reach for phones or make calls, but the authority in Keanu's presence, and the swift efficiency of security, made any resistance futile. Power that had once belonged to them vanished in seconds. Keanu's eyes didn't waver. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The presence of truth, combined with the unyielding authority of someone who had observed everything, carried far more weight than any threat ever could. This isn't about revenge, Keanu said as he watched the executives being escorted out. This is about accountability, integrity, respect. If you cannot uphold these values, then you have no place here. The room, once filled with laughter, whispers, and casual arrogance, was now filled with something far heavier, understanding, fear, and reflection. Every person remaining could feel the lesson deep in their bones. He turned to the rest of the employees who had been watching silently from the corners. Some looked frightened, some relieved, but all understood the message. Your actions define you, he said. Not your titles. Not your clothes. Not the power you think you wield. Respect is not optional. And character is revealed in how you treat those you think have none. A quiet murmur ran through the room. Employees nodded, some eyes glistening with a newfound understanding. Keanu Reeves had not just made a decision. He had delivered a lesson in humility, awareness, and responsibility. Finally, he looked toward the new blind employee, the one who had moved confidently through the office despite the chaos. She had observed everything, unnoticed by most, yet entirely aware. Keanu gave her a small, acknowledging nod. She smiled softly, understanding without words. Strength, after all, does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply walks through life, letting the world reveal its true nature. And in that moment, the boardroom was no longer just a place of wealth or status. It had become a test of character, and those who failed had seen the consequences of arrogance, deception, and disrespect. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe respect matters more than status like this. The decision had been made. The message had been delivered. And the lesson, that integrity outweighs titles, that humility outweighs arrogance, would resonate far beyond the walls of the company. The boardroom was silent. The echoes of hurried footsteps faded, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rustle of papers. The executives who had once wielded authority and arrogance were gone, escorted out by security. The files they had hidden, the secrets they had tried to bury, and the disrespect they had shown, everything lay exposed. Keanu Reeves stood alone for a moment, surveying the room. The polished table reflected the harsh overhead lights, but it also reflected something more profound, the truth of what had happened. Arrogance had been confronted. Deception had been unveiled. And respect, real respect, had been restored. The remaining employees, those who had witnessed everything from the sidelines, were tense. Some had been afraid, unsure of what the sudden arrival of authority might mean. Others had been relieved, recognizing that the chaos of unchecked arrogance was finally over. All eyes were on Keanu. Your jobs are safe, he said, his voice calm but resonant. The words hung in the air, a promise and a lesson in one. Relief spread across the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Some employees exhaled, their shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. Others looked around, realizing how fragile power could be when arrogance is left unchecked. This company will never judge people by clothes, by titles, or by appearances, Keanu continued. Because real character is shown in how you treat people who you think have no power. Those who are quiet. Those who are unseen. Those who don't demand attention but deserve it nonetheless. He walked slowly around the room, letting the weight of his words settle into the hearts of everyone present. Every glance, every pause, every subtle gesture was deliberate, conveying authority without intimidation. He stopped near the young blind employee, the one who had moved confidently through the office despite the chaos, despite being underestimated. She smiled faintly, nodding at him in acknowledgement. Keanu returned the nod, understanding her quiet strength. She had moved through the office with grace, unafraid of the judgments around her, and in doing so, she had reminded everyone present that power and courage are not always visible, but they are always felt. Arrogance, Keanu said, turning his gaze to the remaining employees, reveals itself when we think no one is watching. But strength, true strength, is patient. It observes. It waits. And when the moment comes, it speaks louder than any words, louder than any display of wealth or status. The employees absorbed this, understanding that respect isn't just about following rules or avoiding mistakes. It's about how you treat others in every moment, especially when you think no one important is watching. Keanu paused, letting the silence stretch. The boardroom, once filled with laughter, whispers, and the faint tension of ambition, had transformed. It was no longer just a room of business. It was a room of lessons learned, of humility earned, and of respect restored. Remember this, Keanu said, his voice softening but remaining firm. The world will judge you by many things, but your true measure is how you act when you have the choice to be indifferent. The power you hold isn't in your title, your watch, or the deals you make. It's in your choices, your integrity, your character. The employees nodded quietly, some moved to tears, others simply reflecting on the arrogance and mistakes they had witnessed. No one spoke, for there was no need. The lesson had been delivered. The truth had been revealed. The consequences had been enacted, and the company, now cleansed of those who had misused power, could finally move forward. Keanu glanced around one last time. He saw relief. He saw understanding. He saw respect. But more than anything, he saw a lesson that would linger far longer than today. Power without integrity is meaningless. Arrogance without awareness is fragile. Respect is earned, but it begins with how we treat those who cannot repay us. With that, he straightened his jacket, adjusted his sneakers, and gave a final nod to the employees. Quietly, without fanfare, he walked out of the boardroom. The office that had once been a stage for arrogance and deception now stood as a reminder that character always outweighs appearances, that patience reveals the truth, and that integrity is the greatest power of all. Outside, the world continued as usual. But inside that office, a transformation had taken place. Silence had turned into reflection. Fear had turned into understanding. And the employees who remained would never forget the day that the man in the worn leather jacket, the quiet observer, revealed what real power, respect, and strength truly look like. Backhand index pointing right. He wasn't ignored because he was weak. He was ignored because others were arrogant. And arrogance, when left unchecked, always reveals itself. Speech balloon. Do you think Keanu made the right decision? Thumbs up like if respect should be unconditional. Repeat button. Share this with someone who needs this reminder.